Digital 410 Media proudly presents the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast with your hosts, Don Abernathy, Jeff Copsetta, and Dennis Blocker.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast, your favorite World War II podcast. And we had a little change in schedule last minute this week. That's right. Joining us, as always, Mr. Dennis Blocker Jr. Dennis, how you doing today, sir?
Doing great. Doing awesome.
Before we get started, because I hate to throw the brakes on a good conversation, a good topic, I want to get this out of the way. It's been a while. We've been teasing some Patreon giveaways, and the two things that we've mentioned in the past haven't come to fruition yet. They're still in the mail. But what has come to fruition is if you go to our websites, any of the websites in the Digital 410 family, you'll see some banner ads on the right-hand side. And those are affiliate banners, so if you want to support what we do, you can click on those banners. For example, we have Cast King on there. We have Bully Sticks. If you have dogs, you can buy Bully Sticks. And they send us a little bit of a thank you for that, and it helps keep the lights on around here. Interestingly enough, and I've been doing affiliate programs off and on because I've been hosting websites since 2004. And so I've played around in the affiliate program. I've never had this happen to me before unsolicited. I get the spam through TikTok and Instagram, but never just through our email at info@d-410. One of those companies that I chose to affiliate myself with because I thought they had really great products. I'm not going to put banners on our website for stuff we're not going to buy. You're not going to see, cheap Chinese crap like you see all the influencers on TikTok. There's fishing gear on there. There's some fitness stuff, like I said, dog stuff. And this company is called 1791 Everyday Carry. And since this relationship has formed, we are now affiliated with their parent company, 1791 Gun Leather. They make gun holsters and all that. But this is 1791 Everyday Carry. And you and the host of the other podcast I do, What's in Your Head podcast, you guys are perfect for this. I was perfect for this in my old job. Name me two things as a rancher you carry in your pockets every day. Just two things, just two tools that you use every day.
Pocket knife, for sure.
And?
Absolutely.
One more item.
Well, if you're in Texas, you got a gun on your hip because of rattlesnakes.
Okay, let's say guns aside, just two things you have in your front pockets. Just two items.
All right, you got your pocket knife, of course, and probably a Leatherman, something like that.
Leatherman multi-tool, perfect. Yeah. Morgan over What's in Your Head podcast. His daily job is he works on gas and propane cylinders. He refills gas and propane cylinders. Mike, my co-host on What's in the Head podcast, he's a plumber. They too have pocket items. They got pocket tools. And the worst thing about having pocket tools is you sit in your truck and what happens? The crap falls out and goes down in between your seat and your console, or you get home, you got to pile it out and figure out here's my Leatherman, where's my pocket knife? One of the cool things.
Not only it pinches you.
Yeah, pinches you. In worst case scenario, okay, so actually, I got my original one, hold on. This is an old beat up folder I've had since 2008. And it used to have the little pocket clip, right? So you slide it inside your pocket and the clip would stick outside your pocket, right? Mm-hmm. Here's my K-bar folder. See that little clip right there?
Yeah.
I had this guy in my pocket, clip sticking out, carried it like that all the time. One day I was walking through my driveway and I turned myself sideways to walk in between my truck and my Volkswagen. Got a little bit too close to the Volkswagen. The clip on this knife put a big old line down my Volkswagen because I rubbed my leg up against it. These are things you don't plan on. Well, the fine people over at 1791 EDC, or Everyday Carry, they create tool holsters, if you will, or everyday carry items to help simplify your life. And one of the ones they sent me is this guy right here. And you can see my everyday carry. I have my Glock 27 magazine in there. I have my pocket knife. And what this works is there's a clip on the back, so your belt runs through this. This is an out of the waistband. You can put your multi-tool in there. It has a little loop in the middle for your flashlight. Whatever tool you want to have. So they sent me two of these to test out. They have this another item. We all have the hard shelf money clips, right? You put in your pocket. They make one that's a leather one. It has the pouch on the front to put your cards and all that, and then on the back you can put other items. It's nice, soft, goes in your pocket, and they got a whole website full of just different ways to carry everyday items. And so they reached out to me and said, "Hey, we want to send you some items to test out. All we asking, in return is you post some pictures on your Facebook page and do some videos, which I have done. They were so satisfied. They said, thank you so much. Is there anything else we can do for you? I said, yes. We're constantly looking for vendors who make quality items that we can give away on our Patreon. They said, no problem. So they sent me a box of stuff. So they sent me another one of those. This is the Everyday this is the Everyday Action Snap Small Flex.
Wow.
Same color. Value, $49.95. This is real leather, 100% handmade in the United States. These aren't from overseas. These aren't pumped out on a machine. These are handmade. Every one of these are handmade quality. They got the nice box for the hanger. So they sent me one of these. Then they sent me the Easy Slide Pocket, which I don't have one of these to test, but you can kind of see what it is. You can put your multi-tool in there, your Leatherman, a magazine, wherever you want. Goes right through your pocket. Works perfectly in Texas. And then they sent me another one of the pocket wallet guys with a keychain. And you can really see how quality supple this leather is. And so
that is sharp.
On the back and on the front. It also has a loop for small pocket flashlight, whatever. And so this is going to be the October Patreon giveaway. The whole thing is just a single set to one single winner. Total of over $100 in value right here. So you're going to get these 3 items, over $100 in value. Technically 4 because they do have a genuine leather keychain in there, which actually comes in handy. I know a lot of guys, especially do work, some guys are carabiner guys. On this guy, there's a little loop for carabiner if you're a carabiner guy. And so these things are nice. I know I'm a computer guy. I'm not out in the field, but you know where this works perfect for me? Kayak fishing. When I go kayak fishing, I carry my Glock on me because why? I'm in Florida. What's the 2 biggest concerns in Florida? Alligators and Florida man, right? So I already have a holster for my Glock, but I can't carry an extra magazine or a knife on me. So now when I'm out kayaking, I have this on my side. It's very comfortable. It's waterproof. And I just somehow, moved my mouse. So anyhow, just want to get that out of the way. Thanks to Everyday Carry, $17.91 Everyday Carry. They're going to be the Patreon giveaway for October. I want to give everybody enough time to sign up. You say, Don, well, what do I have to do to sign up? Head over to WTSPWorldWar2.com, click on the Patreon link, sign up, subscribe, choose any one of the 3 plans. We've done this in the past. You just have to be an active paid subscriber. Don't sign. Somehow on our Patreon, we have a free tier, which doesn't give you access to anything. It's just kind of something Patreon put on there to get people interested. You have to be a member of either the $1 a month, the $3 a month, or the $7.50 a month. And as long as you are an active paid subscriber, when we do the giveaway, we're going to just draw a name like we did last time. I think I did one drawing. I think Jeff did a drawing. I think Dennis, you did the drawing last time, did you, or did Jeff?
Yes. Yeah, I did it.
Yeah, so we've all suffered the pain of pulling a name and risking people getting mad at us because we didn't choose their name. But no worry. If you're, this is a great set, genuine leather.
That's awesome.
Matches my service boots perfectly. Real quick, just going to put this out there. If you guys follow me on Instagram and you see this photo of me dressed up like it's the 1930s and it says straight out of Hooverville, go listen to What's Your Head podcast. That was a meme I made. It came out of a result of me trying to brainstorm on how to shoot a photo of me with this, with matching my boots and my hat. That's where that meme came from. I looked at the original photo, I'm like, somebody's going to turn this into a meme. And so I made it fun of myself. So if you want to hear where that photo came from, it was a result of a brainstorming photo shoot for one of these. Head over and listen to the last episode of the What's in Your Head podcast. Now that that's out of the way, Dennis has a great idea for tonight's show. So Dennis, take it away.
Yeah, it was something that has been coming up a lot here recently in some research that I've been doing on some short stories, this new series of short story books that I'm writing. And it has to do a lot with that folks from that time period, 1938, 39, 40. Some folks thought that their youth were too soft, that they could see the wars in England. A lot of folks knew that we were probably going to end up being involved, and they wondered if the youth today had what it takes. And it was something that our own generation wondered after September 11th. And as a matter of fact, a month after September 11th, on October 24th, 2001, Richard Rothstein in the New York Times published an article, and hindsight gives history its best, young soldiers. He said in 1940, Walter Lippmann wrote that during the previous half century, educators had ceased teaching the Western culture which produced the modern democratic state. In 1941, Robert Hutchins, president of the University of Chicago, worried that young people did not have the literary and historical background to participate in a democracy. Mortimer Adler, the philosopher, complained that schools no longer taught the values upon which American society relied. A resulting moral relativism, he said, rendered youth unable to muster the idealism to fight Hitler. This view was typical. Michael A. Males, a sociologist at the University of California, has reviewed a popular literature from the 1930s and found that teenagers who would later save the nation at war were not considered so great. A book about them published in 1936 was titled The Lost Generation. It said that adolescents suffered from widespread mental illness, and a Harper's Monthly article the same year concluded that young people behaved without thought of social responsibility. In the Oregonian in Portland, Oregon, on February 1st, 1939, this article appeared in the newspaper. Youth of today are sitting back waiting for pennies to fall from heaven, Miss Oleta Schrottke, dramatics advisor for Girl Scouts New York City, asserted Tuesday at the Benson Hotel before the Portland Rotary Club. Blame for this apparent attitude is placed by Miss Schrottke upon the parents who take the position of not wanting their boys and girls to go through what they did. Quote, "We seem to be breeding young people that are pretty soft," the speaker declared. And then the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, August 29th, 1940. The article says, homemakers of Texas public schools heard in a panel discussion Wednesday that young people are too soft physically and mentally and are too afraid of hard work. The homemakers are here for a 4-day conference. Discussion Wednesday considered the need of giving youth more responsibility in the home, more discipline for hard work, and on the need of training to turn youth's hysteria and fear in a national crisis into constructive action. Once again, August 29th, 1940. And then we have Roger W. Babson, noticed economist, and he was actually a Prohibition Party candidate for president, expressed the opinion that the fighting will end with Germany. And mind you, this is August 14th, 1940. He expressed the opinion that the fighting will end with Germany in control of Western Europe, Japan controlling Asia, Great Britain still mistress of the seas, and the United States, quote, left out on a limb unless it reforms its mode of living. Babson, who arrived here today on a transcontinental tour, said, American young people are soft. And then in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, January 10th, 1941, less than a year from December 7th, Roy Rutherford, in a sports column, says, it's quite likely we may have been overemphasizing football, but somehow it seems to me it's better to have our youngsters learning to block and tackle as a steady diet rather than to march in goose step. More desirable to have put leather helmets on them rather than tin hats. We're a young nation and given to going to extremes, and huge numbers of our young people are soft and selfish, but surely we haven't done such a bad job. And we see just months from Pearl Harbor, that was the attitude. Don, did you come across anything?
You know, it's interesting. When you're growing up, you hear this from your parents and you're from your grandparents. And then as you get older, you start to find yourself saying these same things. And you're like, well, why is this next generation so bad? Why is they sliding off the rails? But as Dennis points out, if you start looking around, this idea, this concept of generation blaming is as old as society in and of itself. Real quick, here's a quick little grab from an article 2023 from a Nazim Sakib Adult blaming young generations is not a new phenomenon. In fact, it has been going on for centuries. The ancient Greeks and Romans complained about the youth of their time, accusing them of being lazy, disrespectful, and immoral. The medieval and Renaissance writers lamented the decline of education and culture among the young. The Enlightenment thinkers criticized their youngs for being rebellious and radical, and the Victorians era saw the rise of moral panic over the youth's involvement in crime, drugs, and sex. The 20th century witnessed the emergence of young subcultures that challenged the norms and values of the mainstream society, and the 21st century is no different, with adult blaming the young and being too addicted to technology, too entitled, too selfish, and too ignorant. And I went on, and so I did a little research. Listen to this quote. Adults have biased perception of the young generation. Blah, blah, blah. Here we go. The children now love luxury. They have bad manners, contempt for authority. They show disrespect to their elders and love chatter in place of excess. Children are now tyrants, not the servants of their households. They no longer rise when elders enter the room. They contradict their parents, chatter before company, gobble up dainties at the table, cross their legs, and tyrannize their teachers. Socrates. This goes back to Socrates' time. Okay, this is nothing new.
I was totally gonna say that has to be like the 1960s.
This gentleman's name's Robert Russells. I find by sad experience how the towns and streets are filled with lewd, wicked children, and many children, as they have played about the streets, have been heard to cuss and swear and call others by nicknames. And it would grieve one's heart to hear what bawdy and filthy communications proceed from the mouth as such. The 1600s. Winter are the manly vigors of athletic appearance for the foregoers flown. Can these be their legitimate heirs? Can these be their legitimate heirs? Surely no. A race of effervescent, self-admiring, emaciated fribbles can never have descended into the direct line from the heroes of poulters and acronauts. Letters in a Town of Country magazine, published in Paris fashion in 1771. Wow. Hence why I struggle to read it, because the translation of the vernacular in 1771 from French to English. The free access to which many young people have romances, novels, plays, has prisoned their mind and corrupt their morals of many of the promising youth. Listen to that again. The free access to which many young people have to romance novels and plays have poisoned the mind and corrupted the morals of many promising youth. What does that sound like now? Video games and social media have destroyed society. That was from the 1800s. So here's a guy, Reverend Enos Hitchcock was complaining in the 1800s about how the youth of their day, having access to plays and romance novels, have completely corrupted the minds of the most promising youth. I want to do a couple more? I'll do a couple more because leading up to your point, I got some going all the way up to the 30s, which means they would be talking about the children who would become fighting for us in the 40s. Let's see. A fearful multitude of untorn savages, boys, with dogs at their heels and other edifices of dissolute habits, girls, who drive coal carts, ride astride upon their horses, drink, swear, fight, smoke, whistle, and care for nobody. The morals of the children are tenfold worse than formerly. Anthony Ashton Cooper, 1900s. No, he's from the 1800s as well. And then I'm going to skip ahead to the 1930s. The bad manners of all parliaments, the general tendency of convents, the general tendency to convene, I've been sick for a week, so bear with me. The general tendency to convene at a rather shady business transaction if the promise to bring in money without work. Jazz, women, painted like prostitutes, the efforts of writers to win popularity by ridiculing. Let's see, and the bad taste shown even by the nobility and old princely families in throwing off every kind of social restraint and time-honored custom of all these go to prove that is now the vulgar mob that gives the tone. That's from the 1930s by Oswald Spengler. In the 1940s, in youth clubs were young people who would not take part in boxing, wrestling, or similar exercises which did not appeal to them. The tough guy for the films made some appeal, but when it comes to something that led to physical strain or risk, they would not take it. So here's somebody in the 1940s. 2 years later, our kids, the same youth, would put themselves in harm's way by the thousands. Well, the thousands who died, hundreds of thousands who put themselves in harm's way. And once again, in youth clubs where young people who would not take part in boxing, wrestling, or similar exercises which did not appeal to them, the, quote, tough guy of the films made some appeal, but when it came to something that led to physical strain or risk, they would not take it. I think they proved them wrong.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, from Okinawa to Iwo Jima to Sicily to Anzio,
Africa
to Adak, Alaska, to the bottom of the ocean, in the air, in the skies. I mean, it goes on and on and on.
You take any survivor of a Japanese prison camp and rooted in deep depths of China and ask them, hey, you want to spend 4 years in that Japanese prison camp, or do you want to do 12 rounds of boxing? I'm sure they'll happily take you up on the 12 rounds of bare knuckle boxing easily.
Absolutely. I wonder what it was back then. Today we have video games and obviously a very cush life compared to the rest of the world. But, I know that they had jukeboxes back then, and their parents would have not had any of those things. They had the movies, ice cream, hot rods. But I think that they.
Oh no! I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. What are you talking about, the 40s or the 50s? Because hot rods didn't come out until post-war. Are we in this part of our conversation in our exercise here? What year are we thinking?
Yeah, jukeboxes. So early 40s, because I know that like Harry James and those guys, they were but hot rods. You're absolutely right. That wasn't until after.
Well, here's to that point. Here's a fundamental exercise. So we're in the 40s, right? You have two generations. You got the generation of youth that in 2 years from now we're going to be enlisting. Some of them that are already in the Air Corps fighting a little, early before we get wholeheartedly involved. Then you have their parents who saw what their parents did in World War I, but more importantly, they lived through the Depression, right? And their kids were growing up during the Depression, but their parents were the ones going out, standing in the soup lines. Their moms was trying to hold the family together, make meals out of whatever scraps they could find. The parents are out. And in a lot of cases, the kids, depending on where you lived, if you're a farmer, clearly your kids are out farming. If you're in a city, depending on where you lived, a lot of the kids would go, you hear a story where, we'd go down to where the coal would come in and try to grab coal off the train lines and get chased out by the yard workers, or we would go try to collect aluminum or bottles. The kids were trying to make their way, but I'm sure if you think about it in the aspect of here's a parent or a parental generation turning their nose up at their children's generation, which we've just established is just human nature.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that resentment, because, at the end of the day, it's a little bit resentment. It's a little bit, as the article I didn't read pointed out, humans have a tendency to look back at their youth with fondness. And we have a tendency to, for the most part, it's fashionable now to talk about how horrible your childhood was. But even then, when you're not in that competition to prove to somebody you had a shittier childhood than them, when you're sitting alone in your car, you oftentimes think of the better times, right? Or more importantly, if you're not thinking about your individuality, you're thinking, well, when I grew up in the 90s, we had X, Y, and Z. But you never think about the horrible things that happen. You always look at it through rose-colored lenses. But now let's put that in the 30s and the 40s. I guess to answer your question, what was it? I think for them and that generation, I think part of that resentment was the fact that their parents are struggling to make ends meet. The economy crashed. The dads are out there standing in line at the employment office hoping to get a job doing something, or standing down in the soup kitchen hoping to, get enough soup to bring the kids. And then you just look at the kid, even though your kid's out collecting bottles, you still see them doing these activities with their friends. And you're thinking to yourself, look at us. We're all standing out here trying to raise money to keep our families fed, and these damn kids are just out there playing hoop and stick or whatever it is. And so they're seeing them not, yes, they're hungry too, they're suffering. But the beauty of the innocence of children, and you hear this all the time, right? You talk to, whether it's, we hear this from when we talk to veterans who grew up in the 30s, or if you talk to somebody who grew up in the 80s or in the 90s during, the recession, you talk to somebody who grew up in a poor town or a poor neighborhood, they didn't know they're poor because everybody's poor at the same level. It's, most people don't realize it until their parents work their way out of being dirt poor, transition to the next level. But compared to their contemporaries, they're super poor because they made that transition from poor level A to not so poor level B. But for the kids in poor level B whose parents are working their way up that ladder, they see you when you come in that rung as you're the poor kid at the school, even though all the kids at your old school think you're the rich kid. So you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And so I think a lot of times that resentment comes from, and it also comes with technology too, right? The parents, the parental generation of the 40s and the 30s, when they were kids, I mean, if we think about this, those who fought in World War II were born in the 20s, the late teens. That meant their parents were born in the late 1800s, right? And so when we were growing up, we were lucky to have a mule and a goddamn wagon. Now you guys have these automotive cars, you have telephones, electricity, unless you live in Appalachia and some parts of the, flyover states. But for them, just the boom in technology, even though it was during the Depression, I mean, you had, look how much easier they have it. They got electricity. If you lived in a city, you may have some shitty plumbing, but for most cases, there was some sort of water. And so I'm sure just the technology alone compared to what their families had to grow up with in the late 1800s, early 1900s comparatively, was enough to make them resentful. And talk about, oh, you guys would have never made it. You guys would have never made it back in my day. Look how soft you are in your leather bound shoes and your wool trousers. We had to wear burlap underwear. I'm sure. Yeah. I'm sure that's where a lot of the old sayings came from. We had to walk to school uphill both ways in my day because we were on what was the trail that the poor people got stuck in the mountains and they had to consume each other.
Oh yeah, Dahmer Pass.
Yeah, well, we survived the Dahmer Pass. You guys are worried about eating potatoes 3 days a week. My day, we'd be lucky to have potatoes. And so it's just interesting, I think.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And I think that the parents were probably very self-absorbed, and they're so exhausted and tired and worry. I know as a parent, you worry about your kids, how you're going to feed them. But what do all authors say about the greatest generation, what we call the greatest generation? What molded them? Almost everyone agrees it was the Great Depression, right?
It was that hardship.
It was the hardship. So even though the parents may have thought, obviously they thought their kids had it pretty cush, but it's like everybody had some like maybe everybody had some head trauma with some short-term memory loss, because I know a lot of veterans that I interviewed, including like fellows who specifically joined up at 16 just so that it would be one less mouth their mom had to try and feed. 1940 or 1941, or like Lawrence Bozarth, who died at Iwo Jima on the LCI gunboat 449. In elementary school, on his way, he stopped at the horse slaughterhouse, and they would have bones out on the deck, and he would sift through and pick the best bone and stick it in his lunch pail. And then the teacher at school would put water in a pail and boil that bone for him, and he would drink the broth, and that was his lunch. So it's fascinating to me to see in 1930s and 1940, 41, these venerable people talking about how soft the young people are, because the evidence is to the contrary about what they've had to endure in mass. And it wasn't like it was just one small segment of society. It was a large segment of society that was just getting by, and hence the CCC and these guys that went on to fight. A lot of them did join the Civilian Conservation Corps, and they had these jobs, which was awesome, that Roosevelt spearheaded. And, as a matter of fact, my grandmother, her fiance, who died in the Pacific, Delbert Brond, he died on a B-25 in off Australia. He was in the CCC up in Baraboo, Wisconsin, refurbishing Devil's Lake into a campground, and that's how they met. And then he joined the Army Air Corps, obviously. So, it's not like they were out, having a great time, and it is really fascinating to me. Like now, I could see even in the 60s, I could see how the parents would be like, you didn't have it like I did back in the Great Depression. I mean, that's kind of hard to trump that one.
Well, if you look at it in the great scale, and for our generation, this is a little easier to comprehend because we were born in the 1900s, as they're lighting the sand TikTok now. But if I was just pointing it out, my grandfather fought in World War II. He was born in 1921. Okay. Let's say his parents had him when he was 20. That meant his dad was born in the 1900s, right? And so if we go back, when you start to look at it that way, and you start looking at, okay, my grandfather lived to be 89, his father lived to be 75. When you start looking at it that way, you realize how young this country actually is. It's like, oh, wow, 5 generations of my family, and we're, and to your point, when you look at it that way, I think what we're seeing now, being the old people yelling about our kids, I think it's kind of showing that you're correct, that every generation preceding us had it harder, right? And so if we go back to, they came over here, 1400, 82, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, 1500s, 1600s. Then we get to more civilized 1700, 1776. But if we look from prior to the founding of this country, it was just strife, cutting your way out, trying to get land, trying to survive, whether it was through illness, ne'er-do-wells, Native Americans, bears,
Roanoke Island, the whole
whatever. The 3 months coming over here on a ship, hoping that you don't get attacked by pirates, to the founding of our country, multiple wars, World War I, the Great Depression. Every generation's had it harder and harder. And here's another thing that I realized about 3 years ago.
Interesting. Yeah.
Let's look at our government. Until now, there's a handful of Gulf War veterans in office. But until now, go back 20 years, with the Hillary Clintons, the John McCains, the Bernie Sanders, not John McCain, he don't count, he served. But if you look at the timeline of our politicians from the day we founded this country up until post-Vietnam, just about every single politician served this country in some way, shape, or form, right? From George Washington all the way up to George Bush, to John F. Kennedy, John McCain.
Yeah, every president, from even the president.
Not even, but the presidents, but not only that, but Congress, Senate, everybody had stake in the game.
Everybody was a veteran.
Everybody either fought themselves, lost someone who fought. They all felt the harsh pain of war. And then Vietnam came, and then the political machine gave it a bad taste. People got spat on. Gulf War was treated differently, but it wasn't at the same scale as World War I, World War II, Civil War, Revolutionary War. And so over time, more and more newer politicians don't have the military service. There are some but I think we're getting to a point now where percent-wise, we're getting more politicians who haven't had any sort of military background, or if they did, they didn't see combat, versus those who did. And I think you can see that reflection in how things are changing, right? And to that point, when every single generation up until, notwithstanding those you who served, in Iraq, Operation Desert Storm, Gulf War, and all those, which by comparison was a smaller percentage, and our population grew. As our population grew, the percentage of those of you who served in comparison shrank, right? The population of the United States was a hell of a lot smaller than it is now, right? In World War II. And so when you take the amount of men and women who served in World War II based on population, a larger percentage of those people served, and same with World War One, and going back, and even the Vietnam War, we've had a huge population boom. And so when you take the amount of people who still serve today, but compare it to the amount of people who live in this country, that percentage grows smaller and smaller every year. And so as time goes by, and plus with technology, now we got people who can work at home, fewer and fewer people are doing manual labor jobs. More and more people are doing more, as I say here, I'm a Floridian who's sometimes I'll go to the store after work, right? And I'm wearing a sweatshirt, and somebody looks at me and think, why is this, it's 94 degrees outside. Why is this guy wearing a hood sweatshirt? Because I'm somebody who's lucky enough, I'm a Floridian who just moves from one climate controlled environment to the next. I'm in my house, I'm in my car, AC's on. In my car, I'm at work in an office for 8 hours with the thermostat 73. Then I get back in my car, and now I'm in public standing in the frozen food section. So I'm lucky enough to be someone who serves from one climate-controlled environment to the next. Hasn't always been that way for the last 18 years. I've been on construction. I did computers, but I ran a lot of Cat 6 wires and a lot of hot attics and worked a lot outside. So I've worked both sides of the spectrum, but to that point, more and more people have gotten to the point where they get to be someone who works in a climate-controlled environment, goes home in a climate-controlled environment, is at home. And so we've gotten softer by proxy, right? And so I think back to the point, and back to what you're kind of pointing out, as our civilization and technology gets better, the hardships get smaller by whole, at least for the civilized societies, and thus we're getting kind of softer. And so I think the reason every generation looks at the younger generation as weaklings is because we always had it harder. Our parents had it harder than we did because technology wasn't that great. Not everybody had air conditioning in their cars. They had drum brakes. They'd get in car accidents. They'd die. They didn't have crumple zones. They didn't have backup cameras. They didn't have blind spot detectors. When their parents are growing up, they, if they're lucky, they can afford a Model A. And so as time goes by, we had no plumbing. Now you have plumbing, you got phones, electricity. And so, yeah, I think part of that looking down upon the next generation is based on how good we have it comparatively. But the irony in that is, what's the goal of every parent? What's the one thing every parent says? I want to provide for my child the life that I didn't have. And so when we do that, and the child gets to benefit to the life that we never had, then we shit on their generation for it. And that's the irony of it.
That's so true. What's interesting is that article that I started off with was published October 24th, 2001. And that was just right after September 11th. Mm-hmm. And there was no Iraq. There was no Afghanistan. It was all, we knew big things were going to happen. We didn't know what it looked like. And the journalists the last line stated that it has yet to be seen how our young people will fare in this fight. And I would say they did damn good. They went to Iraq and they handled business. Yeah. They went to Afghanistan and they handled some freaking business. In places like Fallujah and Ramadi, taking Baghdad. I mean, when it comes time, and this is also, I think, what people should take heart in, is that when it comes to crunch time, America always has stepped up. Its young people have stepped up, even though it was in the news and our people are soft, our kids are soft, they're not going to be able to do it. I don't know if we can handle the Nazis. They're goose stepping everywhere while we're playing football and going to sports and watching movies. When it came time, they stepped up. And let's not forget about the DNA of the people that are here and what DNA has to do with it too, like what's deep inside you and your ancestors and those who went. Because let's face it, everybody who's here in America got here hard. their ancestors got here the hard way. Either they came by ship and were one of a few dozen who survived the passage, or they came because they were in slavery and they were just unbelievable depredations and hardships, or they fought in wars. They went, and when they got here, they didn't speak the language. They trekked off my ancestors trekked off into the north woods of Wisconsin and chopped down trees and fought grizzlies and bears, fought bears and wolves, and they hacked a living out of that place. You know what all those people had in common, Don? Courage.
An old thing called metal.
They had metal, and that seeped into their DNA, which they then passed on for generation to generation. And I think that when things go down, Americans tap into that.
And we would be remiss to point out, we talked about the people whose ancestors came here one way, shape, or form, but let's not forget those whose ancestors were already here and then had to fight for what previously belonged to them.
Every day.
And then were moved over into, the most shitty land areas that the government was willing to give up. There's a few nice places, the majority of them, like the Polar Seminoles, who were, put them down in that shitty swamp area with all the mosquitoes we call Florida. Okay, we're not going to do anything in that land. That place sucks with all the alligators and the giant mosquitoes, so let's, relocate them down there. And so to have your land and your livelihood taken away and then relocated to some of the worst property because no one else can do anything with it, and then told, okay, I know you're not from here. I know you don't know how to survive here, but you better damn well figure it out because this is what we're giving you.
Wild.
Yeah.
But they did. They did. And that's who everybody walking around here in this country, even the folks that, like down here in South Texas, those folks that are trying to get across the border, which if I lived down there, I'd be trying to do as well. But I can't help but have so much respect for some dude who left Honduras, trekked across Mexico, gets to Texas, and thinks, all right, I'm in the U.S. Well, congratulations, you just crossed into the desert, and now you have to try and survive with the sun trying to kill you, the elements, no water. It's just relentless. There's coyotes, rattlesnakes, scorpions, all kinds of spiders.
And ne'er-do-wells who basically
everything.
Force you to use their services to get over here. Now you're indentured to them. You got to pay a huge ticket when you get over here. And then not get caught and sent back to make it all for nothing.
And then those that make it through, those who do, they go on. And in our history, they've had babies. And those babies went on and fought at Normandy, and they fought in Vietnam, and they fought in the Gulf War, and they fought in Afghanistan, and they kicked some major booty because they come from some hardcore DNA and that metal that you spoke of. It's pretty awesome that the American story is that part of the American story about why we're always able to pull through and make it happen. And I just interesting subject. I'm glad we talked about this.
To lighten things up a little bit, we could go on talking about this, but I think it's kind of fun to leave it up to the audience to figure out the modern day aspect of it. We'll leave that for a different group of people to talk about 20 years from now, because I think we did a good.
Email us your comments.
Yeah, email us at mail call at WTSP But yeah, it's interesting to see how going all the way back to the Socrates, or if you're Bill and Ted's Bogus Journeys, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, a Socrates fan. Yeah, it's interesting to see that. Yeah, it's human nature. One of the things I figured out about 15 years ago, because Carrie and I have been together 18 years, and when we first got together, her brother and sister were teenagers, and now they're married and getting ready to hit 30. I remember one time we were sitting out, and her brother and her sister like 16, 15, and we're talking about, you need to go out and get a job. Well, I can't get a job. Only place going to hire me is Burger King. I'm not going to work at Burger King. And both Carrie and I, when we were teenagers, we worked at Wendy's and McDonald's, all that stuff. Like, why not? You know, you got to learn how to work somewhere. No, they were above it. And Carrie and I were trying to talk to him, and then this thought has hit me, and I've thought about it a lot. And let me know what you think about this hypothesis. The biggest practical joke God has played on man, regardless of how old you are, when somebody older than you tells you not to do something because it's not going to turn out the way you planned, because they've already done it, you think they don't know what the hell they're talking about because they're older than you and they're not hip and wise, that you're younger than them. Doesn't matter if you're 15 and they're 20, or if you're 35 and they're 60, or you're 60 and they're 93. You always think when somebody older than you tells you not to do something because it's not going to turn out the way you planned, go the other way. You always think you know better than they do. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, that has baffled me. I'm very lucky and fortunate because I was like that as a teenager. But something happened. Maybe it happened in Africa when I was run over and almost killed in the Congo, but at 16. But
not for nothing. There's a story none of us know about. You just, I almost got killed in Africa at age 16. Whatever. We'll have to say that for another time.
Yeah. That's a book I'm writing too, called Sitting at the Feet of Africa. But one of the guys, when I went to college, it was a small Christian college, and he is a professor, Dr. Bennell, and he was a family friend of our families for a long time. He knew me when I was a kid. And I really thought I was hot stuff when I was there because everybody knew who my dad was. And so I was already had a name before I got there, and was kind of quote unquote popular. And so I was walking the halls and thinking I was hot stuff, and as a freshman. And Dr. Bennell pulled me in his office, and he asked me he asked for me to list my accomplishments in life at 19. And I couldn't list anything other than surviving Africa. And I hadn't even quite mastered the art of wearing underwear without skid marks even. And
see, the secret is you wear them inside out, outside in, frontwards, and then backwards. You can get, 4 areas of skid marks. And then you
so his point to me was, why are you so prideful? And my feelings were hurt because he brought up a mirror essentially and showed me myself.
Ooh, we don't like when you do that. No, but
yeah,
perfect example of that. Go to a comedy club. Comedians start saying shit. Everything's funny until what he says is pointing a mirror at you. All of a sudden, you're like,
"Yep, that's right." But I thank God that I had the audacity to listen, and I took it as constructive criticism, and I knew that he was telling me because he loved me. And I made the adjustment, and my life changed. And we, even talking to my girls and family and friends, even at a campfire or whatever, it is a moment. It's one of the key moments of my life where it changed my trajectory from being an a-hole to being somebody that people want to be around and have come over and commiserate with. And that was that direct moment. And so I would say don't give up on giving advice.
No, we need it more now than ever.
For sure. For sure.
So I want to lighten the mood up before we wrap up the show. Much like a lot of Americans, especially in this hard times, we cut the cord, right? Why pay $90 for cable TV when I'm only watching 4 channels? I just keep the internet, cut the cable. We all go out and we get Roku TVs, sign up for services if you're lucky enough to live in an area that has internet. But so I have Roku TV. A free service. You go down to Walmart, you buy a 32-inch on-brand TV or whatever generic TV. They all have Roku built into it. And so you turn on Roku TV and you can watch a lot of old crap. Carrie and I are watching Leave It to Beaver tonight and watching the later years when Wally graduated high school and Beaves, now getting the hots for young ladies and this and that. And you're looking at Mrs. Cleaver and like, God damn, she was hot. And you Google it. She was only 41 on that show. Yeah, I'm 46, so nothing wrong with me thinking Mrs. Cleaver was freaking hot. One of the other things I watched is on Roku, you can pause it, Match Game 77. You familiar with Match Game? Gene Rayburn.
I know I've seen it. I know I've seen it.
It was a daytime show, as the name implied. Match Game 77 was filmed in 1977. You had Gene Rayburn. You had Charles Nelson Riley. You had Richard Dawson. Yeah. Richard Dawson played the host in Running Man. I'll buy that for $1.
Yeah.
And the whole point is you have 2 rounds. You know, Dumb Donald was so dumb that he took an egg and planted it so he could make and then a blank. You're like eggplant or a chicken, you know, and then you win it and you make money.
That was a great show.
Well, I'm watching it, and Gene Rayburn, he's probably in his 1977. He's probably in his late 40s, early 50s. And I'm watching one episode after the other because without commercials, they're 20 minutes long, so you can just binge watch these. Nothing else to watch. And he would constantly talk about airplanes. And then one day the contestant was on there. He's like, yeah, I fly out of the airport in Las Vegas. I'm a pilot of the last Ford tri-motor in existence. And Gene's like, you fly a Ford tri-motor? Yeah. What's the hours on the airframe? He started asking real specific, not just, hey, I like to fly in planes. You know, he started asking real specific fucking questions. I'm like, I'm doing the math. 1977, he's in his 50s. I get out to Google. Boop, 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 Gene Rayburn. Let me tell you about Gene Rayburn, host of The Match Game, 1944. G. Rayburn joined the United States Army Air Corps. He began training in Goodfellow Field in San Angelo, Texas, and graduated in 1942. He flew combat missions in the Pacific Theater with the bomber barons of the 394th Bomb Squadron, the 5th Bombardment Wing of the 13th Air Force. On 8/2/1943, he was piloting a B-17E Flying Fortress named the Yankee Doodle. Mechanical failures caused it to crash on takeoff. He flew over 89 missions and was awarded the Flying Cross and the Air Medal before 1945.
Oh my God.
And in the 70s, he's hosting a goofy-ass... Actually, that show went on, I think, until the 85.
That was a great show.
Yeah, I watch it every night. And so I got to think of other celebrities of the time.
I never knew.
Green Acres is the place for me.
Eddie Albert.
You know the Eddie Albert story, right?
Yes.
If you guys ever watched the documentary Return to Tarawa, the person they're following around, he drove a landing craft and he was standing on Red Beach 1. He was talking about, I believe it was on, he was talking about, they may have been interviewing another veteran, but this veteran was talking about how during this combat, people are dying, and he just saw this landing craft zigzagging out in the water horizontally, not going in and out, and seeing some Navy coxswain pulling in guys. The battle itself started on November 20th, 1943, with bombardments from multiple U.S. destroyers and an air attack. After the lagoon was cleared of mines, the Marines then launched the assault on the beaches surrounding the pier. The Marines spent 2 days without reinforcements pushing across the island. The initial attempts to land tanks on the island failed because they got hung up on the reefs due to the nape tide that we all know about. Eventually, the successfully landed some Sherman and Stuart tanks on the island, but only one was operable by the end of the day. By noon, the Marines managed to push to the base of the airfield. The Japanese were unable to launch a counterattack because of the severed communication lines from the naval fire and the loss of their admiral. Let's see here. After Eddie Albert joined the Navy, I'm trying to get to the point. Long story short, I'm not going to find it in this article. They're explaining this in Return to Tarawa. This landing craft was going back and forth. Eddie Albert was the naval person pulling these wounded Marines out of the water. And I think he saved like 60 of them that day. He saved a tremendous amount of these Marines while being under fire himself. I wish I could see quickly in this long article about it. But yeah, this guy saved so many Marines by having his landing craft going back and forth all day, pulling them in out of the water.
He got the Navy Cross, didn't he?
Yeah, I believe so. This is a super long article. I was trying to find it. Yeah, I'm sure I could. Let me just pull up the
Yeah,
the Wikipedia on this will
the
probably.
citation, the medal citation. Eddie Albert.
Bravely rescued multiple Marines stranded offshore under heavy fire. Coxswain, United States Navy, earning the Bronze Star of the Combat V for his actions. His name during the war was Lieutenant Junior Grade Edward Albert Heimenberger. So he's another one of those who changed his name to sound less Jewish when he got in Hollywood. Let me see.
Man, I thought he got a Navy Cross.
'47. He was awarded the Bronze Star of the Combat V for his actions during the invasion of Tarawa in November 1943 as a coxswain of U.S. Navy landing craft. He rescued 47 Marines who were stranded offshore and survived and supervised the rescue of 30 other. So that's a tremendous amount of lives that he helped save.
Goodness gracious.
And it's to me, it's always interesting when I watch these older shows. You know, talking about Leave It to Beaver. Hugh Beaumont. He's the one who did all the narration for the Cold War era duck and cover nuclear bomb training videos you'd watch in school. Duck and cover.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, Leave It to Beaver's father was big into narration before and after the war. Dun, 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 dun. So yeah, there's a good chance that when watching these shows from the 60s and 70s, most of those older gentlemen fought in some way, shape, or form. Interestingly enough, I looked, not Charles Nelson Riley, he was too young. He was born in the 30s. We'll get to him real quick, even though it's not how to do World War II. But Richard Dawson,
Yeah.
he wasn't old enough to fight, but he's like 8th, 9th grade. And in his bio, he talks about being evacuated from his hometown because he was actually lived over in the United Kingdom due to the German bombing raids. And so he really didn't get to complete high school because his high school didn't exist. And so after the war, when he got to age, he did serve with the Royal Navy, but that was in the 50s. So he too was a military man, but just not during the war because he was, wasn't old enough to serve yet.
Wow.
Before we wrap it up, if you are a fan of the Match Game, and you know who Charles Nelson Riley is, he's the funny, openly gay guy. Go on YouTube and look up The Life of Riley. Unbeknownst to me, Charles Nelson Riley did voices on SpongeBob all the way up in 2005. And in the early 2000s, he was asked to give a speech at a Boy Scout camp about his life and turned into a 3-hour speech. And he then turned that into a one-man show, which he toured around. If you go on YouTube and look up Life of Riley, it's the last recording of a one-man show he did in 2007. He was born in 1932. I don't want to give away all the fine parts, but I want to give enough information like, holy shit, this guy lives some history to go on being the crazy game show guy. He's explaining in the late 30s, his father worked for Paramount Pictures as a painter. He would paint the advertisements for the movies. So when you go to the movie theater in the 30s and you see the movie star, he was a watercolor and an airbrush artist, and he would make the big movie posters. And as time went by, he had an appointment with a gentleman who came to town. He was getting into the picture business. And he'd been in the picture business, but he'd only worked in black and white. And he saw John Riley's work for Paramount. He said, man, you're the perfect guy I want to become my business partner. I've been working in black and white. I'm working on this new technology. We're going places. I want to go color. Come to California. Bring your family. John Riley's excited. This is what he wants. He's an artist. Working for Paramount's cool, but he's just working in the art department. Here's his opportunity to be on the ground floor of his new up-and-coming business. This new technology. So he goes home to his apartment in the Bronx, talks to Charles's mom, who was a very hard woman. Charles said that anywhere she went, she had to carry a baseball bat because no one in the neighborhood liked her because she was too busy yelling racial epithets out the window. It didn't matter if you're Jewish, Irish, whatever. Here's poor young gay Charles hiding out and his mom's just screaming epithets. And so one of the through lines, we grabbed her bat and went to the grocery store. So he came home. She's like, no, you have these crazy, bizarre dreams. My family's here. We're not moving to California, Mr. Riley, in your wild dreams. And so my dad turned down this opportunity of a lifetime. And that gentleman who wanted to make my dad his business partner was a guy by the name of Walt Disney.
Jeez.
He's talking about as his Walt Disney got success, his dad got more resentful, started drinking. And as often happened in the 30s, he got taken away in a straitjacket, spent some time in a mental asylum. And so he lost his job. He explained, we didn't have health insurance back then. This stuff was all super expensive. So they had to move to Connecticut. He actually gave the name of the address. And I looked up on Google, and it's still there, and it's still a shithole today. Late 30s, him, his mom, his two grandparents, his aunt and uncle are living in a one-bedroom apartment in Connecticut. His aunt was a head of nurse in New York, had a real bad hip issue from falling through ice as a kid. His doctor convinced her to do this new surgery, this breakthrough surgery that fixes all her problems. She signed up for it. It's this new thing called the frontal lobotomy. It failed. All her hair fell out. And she just sat in the room smoking Lucky Strikes for the rest of her days. And he joked, humor comes from drama. His joke was, here I am, this funny little sensitive boy, joking around about being gay, in Connecticut in the 30s. And I was considered the oddball, even though I went home and sat between my lobotomized aunt and my comatose father for dinner.
Wow. And
then he talks about how him and his friend Randolph got free tickets for doing some advertisement for the Barnum and Bailey circus. And his mom didn't want him to go because they were going to go with their father later that night, but he got tickets, and him and his buddy went. And he said, we got up to the bleachers and the tent caught on fire. I'm like, what? This sounds too good. Pause. Get out the Google. Connecticut, Barnum and Bailey brother fire. 169 people died. Hit play. He pulls out the news. He was there as a kid at the Barnum and Bailey. And so he just goes on this play of all just the life, the tragedy, the horrors that this guy went through growing up in 1932, having to sit down with the head of NBC who told him that queers will never be on TV, and then knowing by 1970s, the dude's on every damn game show. He said, it's a bad habit, but I got to the point in the 70s and 80s where I'd get out the TV guide and see how many times I would appear on TV. So, I'm going to be on TV 5 times on Wednesday. Next, in March, I'm going to be on TV 25 times. He said, it got to the point where he said, I went from being told I'd never be on TV because I'm queer to who do I got to fuck not to be on TV? And that's where he ended the joke. But it's a great, there's so much more there. So if you guys ever had any, interest in Charles Nelson Riley, thought he was funny, thought, here's a pioneer to be openly gay, to work his way on TV in the 60s and 70s. The guy's hilarious. Go watch that. It's on YouTube. It's called Life of Riley. Just the history he saw, the people he knew. He was talking about going to his acting classes. Here we are Tuesday at this 9 o'clock class, and he listed all these people you would know, including Ben Stiller's father. And he read off this list. He's like, all these people, these Academy Award winners, these Oscar nominees, one thing we all had in common is we couldn't act for shit. He said, and I know I was there. So it's just amazing. You hear so much, even if you're not a Charles Nelson Riley fan, but you're a friend of Hollywood and production and just history. The man was born in 1932 and died in 2007. You want to talk about seeing history. 1932 to 2008. He was doing voices on SpongeBob before he died. So you want to talk about somebody who saw some history and lived some hardship and found success. I strongly recommend that.
Yeah, I'm going to check it out.
And I think that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the What's in Your Head podcast. Thank you guys so much. Just a quick reminder, head over to WTSPWorldWar2.com. Click on the Patreon link, sign up, subscribe, get your name entered in to win the $17.91 everyday carry. And, it's a great package, value of over $100. And all you got to do is sign up, subscribe. It costs you $1 a month. But that $1 a month goes a long way to contribute to what we do here. And if you haven't done so yet, head over to youtube.com, look for D410 Media. We've been slowly adding more videos. We've been taking the videos of the podcast, actually adding some cut scenes, like when we had Scott Gibson on for What's in Your Head podcast. We've had Scott on the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast talking about the Pacific and all that, but I had him come on What's in Your Head and we talked about his other movie career. Did you know that Scott Gibson has played, with the exception of the Coast Guard, every single military role? He was in the made-for-TV movie, oh crap, Don.
Trial of Nuremberg.
He was in Nuremberg Trial as an Army private.
Yeah.
He played a Navy private in Anybody's Son, a made-for-TV movie based on a true story.
He gave Goering the
Yep.
sign.
So he played a Marine in the Pacific. He played a Navy, a sailor in Anyone's Son. He played a soldier in Nuremberg, and I think he played a soldier in another movie. But he talks about his first time working with Gregory Hines, and so that you can see that where I take, when he's talking on What's in Your Head, I take movie clips of him in Nuremberg and in him in Anybody's Son. And so you can actually see a young Scott Gibson transition. And we're doing that more and more. So when we have people on here, it takes a little while to edit these videos, but they will come out. And a lot of those we're making Patreon exclusive or Patreon early access, where I'll put it up on Patreon first. You can see the full version before anybody else, or some of them are just Patreon exclusive. So you can see that on Patreon, but go like and subscribe. Go to youtube.com, look for D410 Media. All the podcasts are on there, fishing content, and much, much more. Thank you guys so much. I've been sick for a week. I'm already losing my voice. And so we will talk to you all next week.
This has been a Digital 410 production.